Buenos días, ¿qué tal Tucson? Esto es el noticiero 5 on 20 con Luc Goodhart transmitiendo desde nuestro estudio en el centro viejo de la ciudad de Tucson. Es miércoles 10 de septiembre. En primero, las noticias locales. The immigrant rights group Lupe and Luce held demonstrations yesterday and today to protest the decision to end the DACA program. Yesterday, the groups assembled at Tucson City Hall to speak about the issue. Jessica Rodriguez began the event speaking about her own experience with receiving DACA protections. She said it was difficult to speak at the event because DACA allowed her to continue with her educational and career goals and allowed her to drive a car without the fear of being deported. She then passed the microphone off to Edward Cott, an activist for Lupe and co-host of our very own Adelante Tucson program. Cott spoke about the border wall and the pardoning of Sheriff Joe Arpaio, which he called a slap in the face to southern Arizona. He then moved on to the latest attack on DACA. He said that the event was intended to tell local lawmakers that, quote, Tucson will not stand for it, and that they would continue protecting their families just like they did with SB 1070. He asked where local representatives and the mayor were at the event and demanded that the city take a stand for just and humane immigration reform. Following Cott was Jesus, who represented Scholarships AZ, who spoke about his college experiences. He said that he's been in the country for 16 years but wasn't able to receive DACA because of a technicality. But he spoke about his friends who were able to benefit from DACA by being able to attend school and work. Finally, Pastor Allison from Southside Presbyterian Church spoke about the need for religious leaders to stand up and provide sanctuary to the city's targeted immigrant population. Lupe and Luce also gathered today at De Anza Park and are engaged right now in a march to Tucson City Hall. The groups will hold another protest at City Hall starting at 6 p.m. Several Tucson High students staged walkouts yesterday to protest the Trump administration's decision to end the DACA program. According to the Tucson Unified School District, 60 students from Cholla High and 30 to 40 students from Tucson High walked out of class yesterday. A TUSD spokesman said that the students appeared to be heading toward the University of Arizona Mall to protest the policy. A Cholla student took the stage at the U of A and said they walked out because TUSD doesn't support them. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced yesterday morning that the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, would be rescinded with a 6-month delay to allow Congress to pass legislation on the matter. Sessions called the program a, quote, unconstitutional exercise of authority because it was begun under President Obama. Conservatives have criticized the program as being an overreach from the executive branch. There are 800,000 people nationwide protected from deportation under the program and nearly 200,000 in Arizona alone. 91% of DACA recipients work and pay taxes. Under DACA, they are shielded from deportation and are able to work, pay in-state tuition for state colleges, and obtain a driver's license. According to Homeland Security, those whose DACA renewals are set to expire between now and March 5th, 2018, can reapply as long as the applications are in by October 5th of this year. If the program isn't renewed by Congress, then it will expire in March, hopefully along with at least half of Congress's chances of being reelected. The Southern Arizona VA healthcare system is looking for veterans who have received care from the system in the past 4 years to speak at a panel. They ask that veterans be comfortable speaking in front of groups and are able to attend one of several panels to be held during normal business hours. The panels will run from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. during the months of October and November. The Veterans Voice program aims to have veterans speak about their experiences receiving health care through the VA system. The organization says this helps make improvements for all veterans that receive care through the program. Those interested in participating can call for an initial phone meeting with either Daniel Wallace at 520-792-1450, extension 2460, or Lorian Nelson at extension 2518. You can also contact them via email at daniel.wallace2@va.gov or lorian.nelson@va.gov. There are limited spots on the panel, so reach out ASAP. A referendum to halt the expansion of school vouchers will appear on the 2018 ballot in Arizona. County recorders verified yesterday that the referendum received enough signatures to appear on the ballot, which exceeded the minimum number of signatures. Opponents of the expansion say that school vouchers will take away resources from the state's K-12 system, which is already severely underfunded. Arizona ranked 49th out of 50 states last year in terms of student education spending. Voucher programs enable families to send their children to private and religious schools using taxpayer funding. Usually, vouchers can only be used by low-income families, but the expansion, pushed by Governor Doug Ducey and Republican lawmakers last spring, would enable even families of decent means to receive vouchers. This, opponents say, would use taxpayer funding to benefit private schools at the expense of the state's public education system. Supporters of vouchers have already filed a lawsuit seeking to invalidate the referendum. Backers say that vouchers allow parents more school choice and claim that the program will not impact funding for K-12 education. Now parents will be able to choose between a lousy public school or a lousy private school that profits from taxpayer dollars. A Pima County attorney ruled that the Board of Supervisors cannot censure racist Supervisor Allie Miller for a social media post that some in the state found offensive. In the Facebook post from last month, Miller said that, quote, "I'm sick and tired of being hit for being white. It's all about making us feel like we need to apologize. I am white and proud of it. No apologies necessary." Hi. Pima County's Chief Civil Deputy Andrew Flagg said that an email from Miller asking about censure did not violate any rules. He said that it was a request and not a demand, which would have broken conduct rules. The board was set to vote on the censure at last night's council meeting. The vote would have been a simple public statement and would not have affected Miller's job as supervisor. Miller's statement came the day after the violence in Charlottesburg, Virginia, where white supremacists gathered for a free speech rally. Counter-protester Heather Hay was killed when a white supremacist drove his car into a crowd. Miller's statements were criticized on social media for lacking good taste and being clueless as to the country's race problem. Miller provided no follow-up comment, clarification, or separate post related to her initial comment, further angering some lawmakers and community members. Miller then failed to show up for a board meeting the following week and ignored calls for an apology from community and fellow board members. But yesterday afternoon, Miller issued a statement calling the uproar a, quote, witch hunt by the Democratic members of the board and the media because of her support for the Trump administration. I wouldn't exactly call it a witch hunt, mostly because it's offensive to actual witches, but it is off by just one little letter. Now, in national and international news, hookworm, a disease that frequently impacts areas of extreme poverty and was supposed to have been eradicated in the U.S., has shown signs of a return in the country. A recent study published in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene showed that hookworm is making a comeback in low-income areas of Alabama. There, 1 out of 3 people sampled tested positive for hookworm, a gastrointestinal parasite originating from exposure to untreated waste. In a report by The Guardian, children in Alabama were seen playing feet away from open pools of raw sewage and drinking water beside crack pipes of untreated waste. They also documented human feces being flushed back into kitchen sinks and bathtubs when heavy rains occurred. The study was carried out by Baylor College of Medicine together with the Alabama Center for Rural Enterprise, or ACRE, a nonprofit group seeking to address the root causes of poverty in the U.S. A survey of people living in Alabama's Lowndes County, an area with a history of racial discrimination and poverty, 34% tested positive for hookworm. The parasite enters the body through the skin, often through the soles of bare feet, and travels around the body until it attaches itself to the small intestine. Over months or years, hookworm causes iron deficiency and anemia, weight loss, tiredness, and impaired mental function, especially in children. This, according to the Guardian report, traps children in poverty, where the disease flourishes, causing a cycle of disease and poverty. The disease was rampant in the early 20th century and helped create the stereotype of Southerners being lazy and lethargic. As public health improved, scientists thought they had eradicated the disease by the 1980s. But the new study shows that hookworm is back once again, and it's spreading at a frightening scale in high poverty areas. None of the people included in the research had traveled outside the U.S., leading scientists to conclude that the disease is endemic to this region. In Lowndes County, the average income is just a little over $18,000 per year, and 73% of residents surveyed said that they were exposed to raw sewage washing back into their homes as a result of faulty septic tanks or waste pipes becoming overwhelmed by heavy rains. The authors say that our lawmakers have been ignoring the problem of economic inequality, which isn't just an economic issue, but also a crisis of public health. To treat the problem, the Trump administration plans to import perfectly clean water from Flint, Michigan. Russia's foreign minister informed Secretary of State Rex Tillerson that Moscow intends to sue the United States over the decision to close a number of diplomatic properties. Russian President Vladimir Putin also stated yesterday that his country may have to take the U.S. to court over the decision whereby the U.S. ordered the closing of diplomatic property in Washington, D.C., New York, and San Francisco. The closures were made in return for a Russian decision to expel 755 diplomats from the country. That move was revenge for a U.S. decision under the Obama administration to close 2 Russian embassies in Pennsylvania. These compounds were closed over the suspicion that Russia played a role in interfering with the 2016 presidential election. Russia's TASS news agency reported that the Office of Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be in charge of determining which court will hear the case and which properties are involved. The State Department refused to speculate on what would happen, but said that, quote, "We are confident in the legality of the actions we announced and carried out last week." The State Department then went to work attempting to connect the impending lawsuit to Hillary Clinton's emails. A new study released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that Americans spend nearly a third of their income on housing. The study sought to track how much Americans are spending and what they're spending their money on. It found that Americans spent $57,311 per household on average, which was higher than any year previously recorded. This is the second straight year that household spending increased after a decade of stagnation following the 2008 recession. Even though the numbers looked good, the study found that spending levels are still lower than pre-recession highs when adjusted for inflation. The single largest item was housing, unsurprisingly, with homeowners spending more than those who rent. However, it found that renters spend more on actual rent payments than homeowners spend on mortgage interest. Since 2006, spending on mortgage interest has fallen by nearly a third, while rent has increased by 31% over the same period. Spending on rent first surpassed mortgage spending in 2012. Another change is that Americans spend much less on gasoline than in previous years, as it was down 9% from 2015. The authors claim that low gas prices and higher mileage standards for vehicles played a role in this trend. Americans are also spending less on new vehicles, according to the report, as new vehicle sales dropped more than 9% over the last year and nearly 17% over the past 2 years. On a positive note, Americans are giving away more money than in the past, as the average American household gave over $2,000 in cash contributions, up over 14% from the previous year. However, one of the authors says that political donations probably played a large role, as it was a presidential election year. Once again, the 2016 election ruined any hope of good news. An appeals court in New Orleans gave approval to a revised version of a controversial Texas voter ID law. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals voted 2-1 to reverse a decision by a lower court to block the law. Last month, a U.S. District Court ruled that the voter ID law was enacted with the intent to discriminate against Black and Hispanic voters. The earlier law was called SB 5 and required that registered voters present one of 7 government-issued IDs in order to vote. The new law, SB 5, creates alternatives to voters who cannot reasonably attain the required ID. The appeals judge yesterday said the lower court failed to consider the updated law in this ruling and said that it fixes the problems of the original bill, because the word reasonably can never be misconstrued, like, say, separate but equal. This was 5 on 20 News with Luc Goodhart. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube and Facebook accounts for all the latest Creative Tucson content. And feel free to bother us at info@creativetucson.org. Thanks for watching. Stay cool, stay kind, stay creative, Tucson.